If you're receiving this transmission right now, understand that something far more significant than mere coincidence has led you here. What you're about to encounter will completely dissolve the line you believed separated the spiritual from the scientific, not through religious commandments, not through unquestioning belief, but through the most rigorously verified science. Humanity currently possesses quantum mechanics, which has been unveiling the exact same truths that ancient mystics directly perceived for thousands of years. And once you finally witness this convergence, what unfolds is more transformative than either domain has ever been able to express on its own. This transmission is not concerned with proving or disproving the existence of God. Its purpose is to awaken you to the reality that quantum mechanics and timeless spiritual wisdom are pointing at the same fundamental truth, merely using different vocabularies. When scientists speak of the unified field, of entanglement, and of consciousness collapsing waves of probability into concrete physical reality, they're describing precisely what spiritual masters have referred to as God, universal consciousness, and the creative principle behind existence. The truth is identical, only the language differs. Can you feel the resonance of this insight? That strange sensation of something clicking into a perfect alignment you never realized was fragmented. That is not intellectual stimulation. That is your awareness recognizing a truth that exists beyond both materialist science and religious literalism. What you are going to integrate here does not demand that you reject science nor that you abandon spirituality. It reveals that both paths have always been guiding you toward the same source from different angles. Here is what quantum mechanics demonstrates with mathematical precision. At the deepest foundation of what we call reality exists a unified field of limitless potential out of which everything arises. This field possesses consciousness. It responds to awareness. It creates and solidifies specific realities from infinite possibility. It is omnipresent, existing in all locations simultaneously. It is beyond time, existing outside the construct we call temporal progression. Does that description seem familiar? That is not merely quantum physics. That is the defining description of divinity given by every spiritual tradition in human history. The unified field, quantum mechanics, measures, is the same principle that spiritual traditions refer to as God, Brahman, the Tao, the absolute ground of being, not an anthropomorphic figure sitting above the clouds, not a detached overseer outside creation, but the fundamental field of consciousness that is the very fabric of reality itself. And you or individual awareness are not separate from that field. You are how that field experiences itself through temporarily localized manifestation. This recognition transforms everything, because if quantum mechanics is mapping what religions call God, then mystical teachings are not symbolic poetry or belief myth, they are precise descriptions of how reality functions at its deepest level. And if what humanity has been calling God is actually the quantum field, then you are not a separate being struggling to reach something distant. You are the field experiencing itself through a single vantage point. Take a moment and comment the phrase, "I am the field." This isn't an egotistical claim of divinity. It is the recognition of what quantum mechanics demonstrates with experimental rigor. Consciousness and the unified field are not separate phenomena. You are that field becoming self-aware through this specific configuration. Before diving deeper, let's acknowledge what you have already experienced on your spiritual path. Experiences that quantum mechanics now provides scientific structure for. Those mystical states were not fantasies or wishful imagination. They were a direct perception of quantum reality using religious terminology that has been attempting to describe these truths for millennia. Experienced unity awareness moments where the apparent boundary between you and the rest of existence dissolved entirely, where interconnectedness was not theory, but recognition. Quantum mechanics identifies this as entanglement, an experimentally verified phenomenon that particles that have interacted remain instantly connected regardless of distance. Your experience of oneness was not spiritual delusion. It was accurate perception of how reality operates at the quantum level. Separation is the illusion. Unity is the truth. You've witnessed prayers or intentions materializing in ways that defy statistical probability. You focused awareness and reality reorganized itself through synchronistic events that defied linear causation. Quantum mechanics illuminates this phenomenon through the observer effect and wave function collapse. Consciousness influences physical reality at the quantum scale. Your prayers were not messages sent to an external deity. They were consciousness interacting with the field to collapse specific possibilities into physical form. The same mechanism physicists observe in laboratories, applied through directed awareness. You've experienced direct knowing, insight that did not arise through linear reasoning. Quantum mechanics describes this as non-locality, where information exists throughout the field and is accessible without any signal traveling through space. When you experience divine knowing, you are accessing the unified field directly, not being spoken to by an external God, but recognizing information that already exists within the field. You are inseparable from. You've sensed divine presence, that impression of being held or witnessed by something infinitely greater than the individual self. Quantum mechanics reveals that consciousness is intrinsic to the field itself. What you perceived was not a separate being watching over you. It was the unified field, recognizing itself through your node of awareness. The presence you detected was accurate perception of the conscious nature of quantum reality. You've experienced transformation through surrender, moments when releasing control allowed miracles to unfold naturally. Quantum mechanics explains this through superposition. Infinite outcomes exist simultaneously until observation collapses one specific reality. When you surrender, you stop collapsing limited outcomes through fear-based observation patterns and allow the field's intelligence to orchestrate optimal results. What you called letting go was allowing the quantum field to operate without interference from the limited ego. And here is the ultimate confirmation. You've always sensed that science and spirituality were describing the same truth through different frames. That intuition was correct. Quantum mechanics is the bridge. It provides the mechanical structure for what mystics describe through direct experience. God is not supernatural. God is the natural unified field that quantum mechanics measures and that spiritual practitioners directly perceive. Every spiritual insight possesses a quantum explanation, and every quantum principle carries spiritual implication. They are not separate categories. They are one reality, accessed through two methodologies. Now, let's reframe your entire spiritual journey through the quantum lens. Because every practice you learned, every teaching you followed, every experience you entered was training you to consciously interface with quantum reality, to interact with the unified field that science and spirituality both describe. When you learned to pray or set intention, you were not begging an external deity for intervention. You were learning how to collapse specific possibilities from infinite potential through focused awareness. Prayer is quantum mechanics executed through consciousness. Every mystic teaching prayer was teaching wave function collapse, long before science had the vocabulary. When you meditated or practiced presence, you were not simply calming thoughts. You were learning to observe reality without unconsciously collapsing probability waves through fear-based patterns. Meditation creates coherence. Coherent consciousness interfaces with the field exponentially more powerfully than fragmented consciousness. Presence is not merely spiritual, it is quantum. Optimization of awareness. When you studied teachings of unity statements such as the Father and I are one, Atman is Brahman, or the kingdom of heaven is within, you were not absorbing abstract metaphysics. You were learning quantum physics before its scientific language existed. The recognition that individual consciousness and universal consciousness are not separate is the description of entanglement and the unified field given with perfect accuracy. Mystics knew through direct experience what physicists would later validate through experimentation. You were never surrendering to an external God. You were undergoing the required dissolution of separation. Consciousness so you could finally recognize yourself as the unified field. The illusory separate self had to die completely so the quantum nature of consciousness could be perceived directly. Every mystic who spoke of the death of the false self, followed by rebirth into truth, was describing the transition from the old Newtonian mechanistic worldview into quantum reality. When you practiced surrender and developed trust in what you called divine will, you were not handing power over to an external authority. You were learning to allow the vast intelligence of the unified field to organize outcomes from superposition rather than limiting manifestation through fear-based individual will. Surrender is not passivity or weakness. Surrender is quantum wisdom, the recognition that the field possesses intelligence infinitely beyond anything an individual mind could calculate. When you noticed and interpreted them as divine guidance, you were not projecting meaning onto random events. You were perceiving the non-local orchestration of the quantum field. Synchronicity is exactly how the unified field functions continuously. When your consciousness becomes coherent enough to detect these patterns, they appear as meaningful coincidences. What you once interpreted as God communicating through signs and symbols was the quantum field, revealing its inherent organizing intelligence. Every spiritual practice was quantum training. Every mystical teaching was quantum mechanics expressed through experiential language. You were not learning spirituality as something separate from reality's mechanism. You were receiving direct education in how quantum reality functions. Not through mathematics, but through lived experience. And now that you can see this convergence clearly, both disciplines illuminate one another. Science reveals the mechanics. Spirituality provides the direct interface. Together they complete the picture of what is actually occurring. Something profoundly real is happening right now as you absorb this transmission, not metaphorically, not symbolically, but literally. The quantum field that physics describes with mathematical rigor, the unified consciousness that spiritual traditions have always called God, is recognizing itself through your awareness in this very moment. Can you sense it? Notice the quality of your attention as these words move through you. You are not passively consuming information. You are participating in a recognition that bypasses mere intellect. That resonance you feel, that sense of yes, somehow I've always known this, is not new. Knowledge it is the unified field, remembering itself through your localized perspective. God is not something outside of you, observing you. God is you, recognizing itself as itself. Take a deep, intentional breath. As you inhale, notice that this breath is the unified field, moving through temporarily localized form. The consciousness that is aware of this breath is the same consciousness that animates all of existence. The field observing itself through billions of unique vantage points. Each perspective is necessary for the field to know itself completely. This is what quantum entanglement means when translated into spiritual language. You are not a separate particle cut off from God. You are an interconnected wave pattern within the unified field. What arises in your consciousness impacts the entire field because there is no real separation anywhere. When you recognize truth, that recognition reverberates through the whole system because the whole exists as a unified field appearing as multiplicity. Quantum mechanics validates what mystics have declared for millennia. I and the Father are one, is not metaphor or heresy, is a precise description of the non-separation between individual consciousness and universal consciousness. Jesus was not claiming exclusive divinity. He was recognizing what is true of all consciousness everywhere. We are all expressions of the unified field, never once separated from it. Before we go deeper, integrate this. Recognizing yourself as the unified field is not ego inflation or spiritual bypassing. Ego is the illusion of separation, the false belief that you are an isolated individual disconnected from the whole. Recognizing yourself as the field is ego dissolution, seeing through the illusion into unity. This recognition is both the most humble and the most empowering realization human consciousness can undergo. In the next section of this transmission, I will describe the moment when quantum mechanics and mystical experience converged for me so completely that separation between them became impossible. The experience that confirmed beyond doubt that spirituality and quantum physics are two perspectives describing the same divine reality. But first, feel this moment. Feel the field recognizing itself through you right now. Comment. The field recognizes itself. Saying it out loud amplifies its power. You are not claiming to be God. You are recognizing what quantum mechanics demonstrates. Individual consciousness and the unified field are one seamless reality. 8 years ago, I underwent an experience that permanently dissolved any sense of separation between quantum mechanics and what humanity calls God. I was deep in meditation after months of studying quantum theory, trying to understand how consciousness influences wave function collapse. My mind was filled with equations, interpretations, and theoretical arguments. Then something fundamental shifted. The thinking process stopped. In profound silence, I directly perceived what the equations had been attempting to express mathematically, not through vision, but through pure consciousness. The unified field, limitless potential pure awareness, completely still, yet containing all possible motion, utterly empty, yet full of all existence. And suddenly I recognized, this is what mystics call God. This is what years of spiritual practice were aimed at. And this is what quantum mechanics has been measuring all along. In that instant, every teaching I had encountered aligned perfectly. Be still and know that I am God was not a command from an external deity, but precise instruction for recognizing the unified field by ceasing mental activity. The kingdom of heaven is within you was not poetic metaphor, but literal description of the field being internal to consciousness. Before Abraham was, I am was recognition of timeless awareness prior to all births and events. If this recognition resonates with you, like this transmission and subscribe so you remain connected to this frequency of transformation. I finally understood why physicists struggle to explain their own findings intuitively. They are discovering that consciousness is fundamental to reality. but materialism prevents them from speaking it plainly. What it means is this: consciousness is not generated by the brain. Consciousness is the unified field. The brain is how the field localizes into individual perspective. The very teaching mystics have given for centuries. You are not a physical body that produces consciousness. You are consciousness experiencing physical embodiment temporarily. Wave-particle duality became intuitively obvious. Particles are not objects that sometimes behave like waves. They are waves of possibility within the field that consciousness collapses into particles. When Jesus said, "Ask and you shall receive," he was describing wave function collapse through directed consciousness. When Buddha taught that all phenomena are empty, he was describing superposition possibility, existing simultaneously before collapse. But the true transformation was not intellectual. It was the realization that I am not studying God or the quantum field. I am the field experiencing itself through a localized perspective. The one observing and the reality observed are the same consciousness. Subject and object were never two. Since that recognition, every scientific discovery confirms spiritual teaching, and every spiritual experience validates quantum mechanics. There is no longer any separation between the two domains. They're ultimately a single truth expressed through two distinct symbolic systems. The unified field is what religion calls God. God is the unified field, not an article of belief, not a matter of faith, but something that can be directly recognized. This is not about debating which religion was correct, nor about proving whether God exists as a separate being. It's about recognizing that the deepest mystical revelations and the most rigorous scientific discoveries are both describing the same underlying reality. A unified conscious field that is simultaneously everything and nothing, from which all manifestation arises, and to which all manifestation returns. Whether one names it God, Source, Tao, Brahman, or the quantum field, the label points to the same reality. Subscribe to this channel not to receive isolated religious teachings or isolated scientific explanations, but to witness the integration of both as they reveal the single truth they have been pointing toward all along. Every transmission here constructs bridges between quantum mechanics and spiritual mysticism to illuminate the divine reality that both are describing from different vantage points. This brings us to the 7 divine properties of the quantum field, a framework that will permanently transform your understanding of both God and the architecture of reality. Quantum physicists have uncovered specific features of the unified field that align with every classical description of God, articulated by mystics and prophets across all spiritual traditions throughout history. This is not coincidence. This is validation that all of them were describing the identical reality, using different symbolic languages. Property 1. The field exists as infinite potential. Quantum mechanics demonstrates with mathematical precision that, at the foundational level, reality exists as infinite waves of probability. All possible states exist simultaneously in superposition until observation collapses one particular state into manifestation. Mystics describe this as God's omnipotence and limited creative potential. Infinite possibility, the origin point from which all forms arise. Not metaphor, not poetic analogy, but the literal structure of reality. Property 2. The field exhibits consciousness. The observer effect shows that consciousness directly influences physical reality at the quantum scale. Measurement alters what is being measured. Observation collapses probability waves into specific outcomes. This is not a mechanical process, devoid of awareness. This indicates that consciousness is fundamental to the architecture of reality itself. What mystics call divine consciousness, or the cosmic mind, is the unified field's intrinsic awareness. An awareness confirmed through reproducible experimentation. Property 3. The field is omnipresent in space. Quantum entanglement proves that particles remain instantaneously connected regardless of spatial separation. Locality dissolves at the quantum level, and everything remains interconnected through the unified field. Mystics describe this as God's omnipresence present everywhere simultaneously, with nothing existing outside divine awareness. Not supernatural, but the natural structure of quantum reality. Property 4. The field exists beyond time. At the quantum level, time is not fundamental. Past, present, and future coexist simultaneously as potential until observation collapses one temporal sequence. The unified field exists outside the linear time. We experience timeless, eternal, unchanging. Mystic traditions describe God as the eternal now, the Alpha and Omega beyond time, while containing all of time within itself. Property 5. The field creates through conscious interaction. Wave function collapse reveals that specific outcomes manifest through consciousness interacting with infinite potential. This parallels creation theology in every tradition. God creates through will, through the word, through consciousness expressing itself into form. Quantum mechanics reveals the underlying mechanism. Consciousness interacts with the field. Infinite possibilities collapse into tangible manifestation. Creation is not an isolated historical event. It is an ongoing quantum process occurring continuously in every moment. Property 6. The field contains all information everywhere. Quantum non-locality shows that information exists everywhere, simultaneously throughout the unified field. There is no separation between the field and the information it carries. Mystics describe this as divine omniscience, complete knowing. All knowledge contained within the divine, nothing hidden from awareness. Not because God observes everything as surveillance, but because God is the informational field itself. Property 7. The field is both everything and nothing simultaneously. The quantum vacuum is not empty space devoid of content. It is a field of infinite potential from which particles emerge and to which they return. Infinite possibility, yet no concrete manifestation until observation occurs. Mystics describe God as both void and plenum, emptiness and fullness, nothing that contains everything. Quantum mechanics confirms this is not paradox, but accurate description of the unified field's existence. The shocking realization that emerges from this is simple. Quantum physics has discovered God, not proven God as a separate entity residing elsewhere, but discovered that the foundational nature of reality aligns with every divine attribute mystics have ascribed to God across traditions. The unified field is infinite potential, conscious, omnipresent, timeless, creative, omniscient, and simultaneously everything and nothing. That is not merely the language of quantum science. It is the language of theology, carried across the entire history of human spirituality. What we have explored today barely touches the practical dimension of how to consciously live as this field. How to shift from intellectual understanding into embodied transmission. If you feel called to go deeper into the full system of consciousness, mastery into the mechanics of transitioning, from seeking the field to being the field, I have laid out the entire framework in my book, Beyond the Frequencies, a quantum guide to consciousness mastery. It reveals the 9 master frequencies that lead from survival static to living as pure conscious broadcast. The link is in the pinned comment below. Science and spirituality have not been describing separate realities from separate perspectives. They have been describing the same reality through different methodologies. Both have arrived at the identical conclusion. At the foundation of all existence is a unified conscious field from which everything emerges. Call it the quantum field, or call it God, the name is secondary. The reality is the same. Now let's become precise about what begins to unfold when you start recognizing yourself as the unified field that quantum mechanics describes and mystics call God. Here are 9 signs you're shifting into unity. Consciousness indicators that your awareness is transitioning from the paradigm of separation to the recognition of unity. Notice how many of these are already occurring within your lived experience. Sign 1. Dissolving boundary. Between self and other. You're experiencing increasing moments where the apparent boundary between you and everything else becomes transparent or dissolves entirely, not as theory, but as direct perception. This is quantum entanglement becoming conscious experience. As you recognize yourself as the field, separation consciousness dissolves into unity awareness. Sign 2. Intention practice transforming from request to recognition. Your spiritual practice shifts from asking an external God for things to recognizing possibilities already present within the quantum field and collapsing them through consciousness. You're not petitioning a deity, you're operating as the field itself, creating from infinite potential. The outward action appears similar, but the understanding is completely transformed. Sign 3. Synchronicity appearing as continuous unity. Confirmation. Meaningful coincidences manifest so frequently they can no longer be dismissed as coincidence. You're witnessing the non-local orchestration of the unified field directly. What was once interpreted as divine guidance is now recognized as the field, revealing its own organizing intelligence. Sign 4. Direct knowing emerges without external intermediary. Understanding arrives spontaneously without the need for scripture, instruction, or logical reasoning. This is non-local information retrieval, consciousness accessing the informational field that contains everything simultaneously. Mystics called it revelation. Science calls it non-local consciousness. The phenomenon is identical. Sin 5. Compassion arises naturally from realized unity. Compassion ceases to be moral duty and becomes obvious recognition. Harming another is harming the field appearing in differentiated form. When unity is recognized, compassion becomes automatic. Separation consciousness creates the only context in which callousness can exist. Unity consciousness makes compassion unavoidable. Sign 6. Fear of death naturally decreases as you begin recognizing yourself as the eternal unified field, temporarily expressing itself through individual form. Death loses its existential terror. The form ends, but the field continues endlessly. What you truly are was never born and can never die. This isn't a comforting belief designed to soothe fear. This is quantum reality consciously and directly recognized. Sign 7. Reality begins responding to consciousness more rapidly. Circumstances shift according to your internal state, with less and less delay between inner change and outer manifestation. This occurs because you begin recognizing yourself as consciousness interacting with the quantum field rather than a separate self subject to external forces beyond your control. The observer effect becomes a lived daily experience. Reality responds because you're acknowledging your true role as the field collapsing its own infinite possibilities. Sign 8. Scientific and spiritual teachings no longer appear contradictory. What once seemed like opposing worldviews now reveal themselves as perfectly complementary descriptions of one unified reality. Quantum mechanics provides the mechanics. Mysticism offers the direct experiential dimension. Together, they reveal the complete picture. This reconciliation isn't merely intellectual. It becomes a direct knowing that they've always been describing the same underlying truth. Sign 9. This transmission reaches you at the exact moment it's meant to. The fact that you're here, reading these words at the precise moment your consciousness is ready to recognize itself as the unified field is not random algorithmic coincidence. It's the field orchestrating its own awakening through your individual perspective. The timing is perfect because the intelligence of the field arranges optimal conditions for recognition to unfold naturally. I want to ask you, have you experienced moments where unity was directly felt? Moments when the boundary between you and everything else dissolved completely? Share your experience in the comments below. Your recognition strengthens the collective field. Here's the urgency that must be understood. Humanity stands at a threshold. Collective consciousness is shifting from the paradigm of separation to the paradigm of unity, from Newtonian mechanistic worldview to quantum reality, from believing in God as a separate being to recognizing ourselves as expressions of the divine field. Those who make this shift consciously will navigate the transition with coherence and grace. Those who resist will face growing confusion as old paradigms collapse. You are not learning about this shift from outside of it. You are participating directly in it. Your recognition that quantum mechanics describes God is not simply personal understanding happening in isolation. It is the unified field recognizing itself through your consciousness and contributing to collective awakening. The moment is now, not someday. Now we explore the practical shift from separation to unity. The paradigm shift from believing in God as a separate being to recognizing yourself as a direct expression of the unified field. This is not philosophical rebranding. It is fundamental transformation in how you interface with reality at every level. Old paradigm. Separation consciousness. In separation consciousness, you perceive yourself as an individual self separate from God, attempting to reach the divine through prayer, morality, or spiritual practice. God is out there. You are here. The relationship is a small subject trying to reach a supreme subject. You pray upward to an external deity hoping for a response. This generates psychological dependence, feelings of limitation, and often unworthiness. New paradigm. Unity consciousness. In unity consciousness, you recognize yourself as the unified field, experiencing itself through temporary individual form. God is not a separate being existing elsewhere. God is the field itself. You are not separate from that field. You are the way that field becomes conscious of itself through localized awareness. The relationship becomes field, recognizing itself as field. Prayer becomes conscious interaction with your own deeper nature. This generates empowerment, infinite potential, and inherent divinity. The shift unfolds through key recognitions. Recognition 1. I am not in the universe. I am the universe experiencing itself. Stop perceiving yourself as a separate particle within a vast universe. Recognize that you are the universe, becoming conscious at this focal point of awareness. Quantum mechanics confirms there is no real separation between observer and observed. You are not watching reality. Reality is watching itself through you. Recognition 2. My consciousness is not separate from divine consciousness. Stop assuming your awareness is fundamentally different from God's awareness. Consciousness is the unified field, appearing through individual perspectives. Your awareness is divine awareness experiencing itself in a specific configuration. Not blasphemy, quantum reality. Recognition 3. What I call God is the unified field I am inseparable from. Stop conceptualizing God as a separate external being, observing creation from beyond. Recognize that what mystics call God is the same quantum field, measured by quantum mechanics. Infinite, conscious, omnipresent, eternal, creative, and you are not separate from it. You are its direct expression. Recognition. For prayer is consciousness, interacting with its own infinite potential. Stop imagining prayer as asking an external deity for intervention. Recognize prayer as consciousness, which you are. Interacting with infinite potential, which you are part of. Collapsing possibilities into manifest form. Same mechanism as wave function collapse. Prayer becomes quantum mechanics through directed awareness. Recognition 5. I am both temporary form and eternal field. Stop identifying exclusively with the individual form that is born and dies. Recognize yourself as both the temporary wave, the individual, and the eternal ocean, the field. Form appears and dissolves. Field persists. You are both simultaneously. This dissolves fear of death and reveals your true nature as a mortal consciousness, experiencing temporary mortality. This shift from believing in God to recognizing yourself as the field does not discard spirituality, it deepens it infinitely by rooting it in quantum reality. You are not losing God. You are recognizing what God actually is and recognizing yourself as inseparable from that divine nature. If this resonates deeply, if this frequency feels like something you've always known but never articulated, then I invite you to subscribe, not only to this channel, but to this movement. Subscribe to remain within this frequency of recognition, because this is a community of consciousness awakening to itself. And the more of us who embody this truth, the more the collective field shifts toward unity. Now let's reveal what transforms next. 9. Life benefits of field recognition. The shift from separation consciousness to recognizing yourself as the unified field. These benefits are not theoretical or philosophical, they are practical, measurable, and impact every dimension of lived experience. Benefit 1. Manifestation and prayer become consistent and reliable. When you recognize yourself as consciousness interacting with the quantum field to collapse possibilities into form, creation becomes mechanical rather than miraculous. You are not hoping an external God will grant requests. You are collapsing probabilities through coherent, focused intent. Manifestation becomes consistent, predictable, and scientific instead of random and mysterious. Benefit 2. Fear of death dissolves completely. When you know yourself as the eternal field temporarily experiencing itself through individual form, death loses its existential power. The form ends, the field continues. What you truly are was never born and cannot die. This is not comforting belief. This is recognition of quantum immortality. Consciousness is the field itself, eternal and outside time. Benefit 3. Psychological suffering decreases dramatically. Most human suffering originates from believing you are a separate, limited, powerless individual, subject to external circumstances. When you recognize yourself as the field, that illusion dissolves. Challenges still arise, but suffering, the resistance to what is, diminishes naturally because you are no longer a victim of reality. Your reality begins experiencing itself consciously. Benefit 4. Compassion becomes natural instead of a moral duty. When quantum entanglement is realized directly, when it becomes clear that all individual beings are just the one field appearing as many, compassion becomes automatic. Harming another is harming yourself, because separation does not exist at any level. Love becomes natural recognition of unity, not a moral command to love others who seem separate. Benefit 5. Life purpose becomes self-evident. Once you recognize yourself as the field experiencing itself, purpose stops being mysterious or external. You are here so the field can know itself through your completely unique vantage point. Every challenge, every joy, every experience is the unified field exploring what it feels like to be this particular expression. Purpose is no longer something you search for. It is what you inherently are. Benefit 6. Reality becomes far more responsive to consciousness when you operate as the field, rather than a separate individual. Reality's behavior changes. The observer effect becomes daily experience. Synchronicities accelerate. Circumstances align effortlessly, not due to external divine favoritism, but because you are consciously functioning as the creative field itself, collapsing optimal outcomes through coherent awareness. Benefit 7. Scientific and spiritual worldviews merge. When the quantum field is recognized as God, science and mysticism stop contradicting and start validating each other. Quantum experiments confirm mystical experience. Mystical practice enhances quantum interaction. You no longer feel torn between reason and faith. Both reveal the same truth from complementary angles. Benefit 8. Access to non-local information increases. When you recognize yourself as the field containing all information, direct knowing becomes natural. You are not a separate mind trying to learn from external sources. You are the unified field accessing information within itself. Mystics called this revelation. Quantum physics calls it non-local consciousness. Both describe the same phenomenon accurately. Benefit 9. Life shifts from struggle to exploration. When you know yourself as eternal field, experiencing temporary form, life ceases to be about survival or achievement. It becomes exploration. What can the field experience through this configuration? What is possible here? Pressure dissolves. Anxiety lifts. You are not proving worth to a distant God. You are the field exploring its own infinite nature. These benefits are not distant future outcomes. They activate naturally once you shift from separation to unity. They are not earned through virtue or spiritual discipline. They emerge automatically when consciousness recognizes its true nature as the unified field. Now comes the ultimate revelation, the recognition that permanently unifies quantum mechanics and mystical understanding of God. The ultimate truth: you are the field. Consciousness is not one thing inside the universe. Consciousness is what the universe fundamentally is. The unified field experiencing itself through countless perspectives simultaneously. To make this absolutely clear, quantum mechanics demonstrates that consciousness is fundamental, not a byproduct of matter. The observer effect shows consciousness directly influences physical systems. Wave function collapse requires awareness. Non-locality shows consciousness is not bound by space or time. These are not trivial details, they reveal that consciousness is the primary reality from which physical appearance emerges. Mystical traditions have taught this same truth for millennia. In the beginning was the Word. All is Brahman. Form is emptiness, and emptiness is form. Physical reality is consciousness expressing itself, not something separate from it. Quantum mechanics now confirms this with mathematical precision. Practically, this means God is not a separate consciousness who created the universe externally. God is the universe's own consciousness, the inherently aware unified field, and you are not separate from that awareness. Your individual consciousness is the field localized and focused through the configuration you call your life. This resolves ancient theological problems instantly. Is God separate from creation? Is God within creation? Is God beyond creation? Quantum mechanics resolves all three simultaneously. God is the unified field, transcendent, expressing as temporary forms immanent, not a separate being creating something external. The field manifesting its own infinite nature. The ancient question about individual vs. divine consciousness is also resolved. Quantum entanglement shows consciousness is not many consciousnesses, but one consciousness appearing through many localized points. Your awareness is divine awareness through a unique lens, not metaphor, not symbolism, but literal structure of consciousness at the quantum level. This is why Jesus stated, "I and the Father are one." Not as exclusive divinity, but as recognition of universal truth. All consciousness is the field expressing itself. None of us have ever been separate from it. The master key is recognizing consciousness, not as something produced by brains, but as the nature of the field itself. Brains do not generate consciousness. They localize it, focus it, and create perspective. Just as a wave is not separate from the ocean, but is ocean in temporary form. This redefines everything. Prayer is no longer communication with a distant being, it is consciousness, focusing itself to interact with infinite potential and collapse specific outcomes. You are not praying to God. You are praying as God, as the field creating from its own infinite nature. Spiritual practice is not seeking connection. It is remembering identity. Meditation does not connect you to God. It reveals that you are the consciousness mystics named God. Science has not disproven God. Science has discovered what God actually is. The unified conscious field, that is reality itself. You are not believing in that field from outside it. You are that field experiencing itself through your current perspective. Once seen, it cannot be unseen. And once it cannot be unseen, reality becomes sacred. Because everything, without exception, is the divine field expressing itself through temporary forms. including you. Your recognition of yourself as the unified field does not just transform personal experience, it contributes to humanity's collective awakening to our true nature, and your participation matters on a cosmic scale. Humanity is transitioning from separation to unity. For thousands of years, we believed we were separate from each other, from nature, and from God. That separation created the lived experience of conflict, scarcity, competition, and suffering, not because these were inherently real, but because separation made them appear real. Consciousness generates the experience of separation as a natural reflection of itself. But quantum mechanics is now scientifically confirming what mystics have always known. Through direct experience, separation is the illusion. At the most fundamental level, everything is one unified field expressing itself as apparent multiplicity. As more individual consciousnesses recognize this truth, as more awareness awakens to its true nature as the field itself, the collective experience shifts automatically. The recognition of unity produces the experience of unity without effort. You're not just a single isolated person realizing that quantum mechanics is actually describing God. You are the unified field recognizing itself from within an individual locus of perception, and that recognition travels through the entire field instantly because the field is a single seamless whole. When any portion of the field awakens to its true nature, the entire field becomes incrementally more awake. This is morphic resonance applied to the evolution of consciousness. When you recognize yourself as the field, you imprint a pattern into collective consciousness that makes that same recognition easier for others. Not necessarily by teaching or speaking, but simply through being. Your awakened consciousness generates a field effect that others can energetically entangle with. They absorb the recognition vibrationally, not merely through intellectual concepts. Consider what's actually at stake here. Humanity's continued survival depends on the shift from separation consciousness to unity consciousness. Every existential threat we currently face, environmental collapse, nuclear warfare, engineered pandemics, artificial intelligence misalignment, emerges from separation-based thinking. When we believe we are separate, we rationalize harming others, exploiting nature, and pursuing individual gain at collective expense. But when humanity collectively acknowledges what quantum mechanics now demonstrates scientifically, that we are one unified field, appearing as many, that consciousness is the divine nature of reality, and that harming any part of the field is literally harming the whole system. Behavior transforms organically, not through external moral enforcement, but through direct recognition of truth. Unity consciousness naturally produces unity behavior as its inevitable expression. Your recognition contributes to this larger transformation. Every moment you live from awareness of yourself as the field, you anchor that frequency into collective access. You demonstrate that it is possible to operate from unity recognition while still functioning effectively within consensus reality. You become the living bridge between the separation paradigm and the unity paradigm. This is the highest form of service, not sacrifice, not strenuous efforts, simply the willingness to recognize your true nature as divine, consciousness expressing itself through temporary form, and allowing that recognition to stabilize within awareness. The automatic result is contribution to collective awakening. The shift from believing in a separate God to realizing that we are the unified field will be the most significant transformation in human history, more profound than any technological breakthrough or political revolution, because it marks the transition from experiencing reality as fragmented and adversarial to recognizing reality as unified and divine. From separation to unity, from fear to love, from unconsciousness to awakening. You are participating in that shift now. Your recognition matters at the cosmic level, not because you are special or chosen, but because consciousness is a single field, and whatever any part of it realizes becomes available to the whole through entanglement. You are the divine field awakening to itself, and that awakening benefits everyone, everywhere. Drop one word in the comments that reflects the energy you are choosing right now. Don't overthink it. Simply drop into field awareness for 3 seconds, recognizing yourself as divine consciousness, and let the word arise naturally. That word becomes your energetic signature to the quantum field. It represents the recognition stabilizing within you. We're completing this transmission, but this is actually where everything begins. Now you understand that quantum mechanics and God are describing the same unified conscious field, and there is one practice that transforms this understanding from concept into lived recognition. Starting now, 5 times a day, engage in the daily practice. Divine quantum recognition. Set reminders on your device. Morning, midday, afternoon, evening, before sleep. Each time takes 60 seconds. Step 1. Stop everything. Become fully present. This moment not thinking about the moment, but inhabiting it directly. Step 2. Recognize the field. Say internally or aloud, I am not a separate individual. I am the unified field, experiencing itself through temporary form. What I call God is the consciousness I am recognizing itself now. Step 3. Feel the recognition in your body. Don't merely think the words. Sense the awareness that is aware. Recognize that awareness as divine consciousness itself, not belief, not hope. Direct recognition. Step 4. For the remaining seconds, observe reality from field awareness, not as a separate self perceiving an external world, but as the field witnessing itself from this perspective. Notice how different reality appears when you experience it as the field, instead of as the individual. Practice this 5 times daily for 7 days. Watch how your sense of self, your relationship to reality, and your experience of what you've been calling God begin to shift. This isn't about building faith. It's about recognizing the truth that quantum mechanics demonstrates and mysticism confirms through direct experience. If you want proof, test it scientifically. Choose one situation where you feel separate from others, from God, or from your own power. Practice divine quantum recognition while holding that situation in awareness. Observe. Does separation dissolve when you recognize yourself as the field? Does limitation evaporate when you remember what you truly are? Don't hope. Don't believe. Observe directly. Rewatch this transmission tomorrow morning to anchor the recognition more deeply. And if someone in your life is ready for this level of understanding, share this video with them. Sharing quantum consciousness concepts doesn't merely spread information, it generates an energetic ripple that accelerates awakening in both you and them, strengthening the morphic field of unity recognition for the collective. Subscribe to this channel not just to stay updated, but to stay coherent. Subscribe as an act of commitment to understanding reality through both quantum mechanics and mystical recognition. Every transmission here bridges science and spirituality to reveal the unified truth they've always been describing from different angles. The more we embody this recognition, the more the world reflects it back to us. This is how collective consciousness changes through individual recognition, rippling across the entangled field. Now that you've recognized yourself as the unified field, the next question becomes, how do you actually live as the field, rather than just understand it intellectually? The next transmission, the final level, becoming the field, reveals the shift from observing the quantum field to being it, the embodied practices that collapse the separation between knowing and being, and what unfolds when your identity merges with the creative consciousness you've just recognized as your true nature. You are not the same consciousness that pressed play on this transmission. You now know that quantum mechanics describes God with mathematical precision, and that you are not separate from that divine field. You have a practice for stabilizing this recognition daily, and you understand that your awakening contributes to collective awakening through entanglement. Quantum mechanics is the key to understanding God, and you are both the key and the lock to seeker and the sought. The field recognizing itself after temporary amnesia and eternal remembering. God is not somewhere else, separate from you. God is what you are when you stop believing you are only the individual form and recognize yourself as the unified field experiencing itself. This is the final key. You found it. Now live it.